Now, I don't think anyone would be shocked if I told them, hey, GameStop might be in a bit of trouble with how everything's going in the gaming industry. The big lean towards digital, it's becoming more and more obvious every year where we're pretty much going with this full industry. I mean, we have companies now that exist just to make physical copies of digital-only games, right? Limited Run Games, for example, is that type of company. So it's only natural that GameStop would be declining a lot, and it's becoming more and more obvious as we go that they are in a lot of trouble. And they actually posted some quarterly results, and this ended on November 3rd for their third quarter of their fiscal year, and it wasn't good. Now, there are some interesting things to take from this outside of the face value of a near $500 million loss. Yeah, that's a $500 million net loss. That is not good, but we kind of have to break it down here and look at the numbers and really figure out what's going on as best as we can. I'm not the biggest person into stocks or investing or anything, but it becomes very obvious to people who aren't even into that stuff kind of how much trouble that GameStop is in. So they posted their results. GameIndustry.biz did a very good article where a lot of this info is coming from for the numbers. So if you want to check that out, there's a link down in the description to do so if you want to read further. So a $488.6 million loss. That is drastic for GameStop. The one thing about that, though, is that is not a cash loss, so they didn't actually lose that type of money. This is more of a write-off for assets that they had purchased or have, and just the value of those assets have fallen. Mostly value of seems to be their share price, which we're going to get into as well, which is paints a big picture as to the direction that GameStop's going into. Now, when they reported these numbers, they did at least say that there was some good. For example, hardware sales for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One X have jumped over last year 12.8%, which is good and bad. So you don't really make any money on hardware sales, so they're probably more or less talking about just their straight up gross numbers for that, because they don't actually make a lot of profit on that. But the other bright spot was that they were actually up 10.9% thanks to the launches of Spider-Man, Red Dead Redemption 2, and of course Call of Duty. They got very lucky that Call of Duty moved into October to help out with that fiscal quarter, because I think without Call of Duty it would have been worse. But yeah, Call of Duty, Red Dead Redemption 2, and Spider-Man. Now think about this for a second. Red Dead, Spider-Man, and Call of Duty all fell into that quarter, and it was software was still only up 10.9% to last year in that time frame. This, of course, again, takes place up to November 3rd. So 3 months prior to that is what we're talking about here, that whole window. And that does mean that there wasn't a Call of Duty for this time, this last year, since that came out later in November. However, there's also no Red Dead Redemption 2. There was no big Spider-Man release, something we've been building to for a while. I feel like it should have been a bit higher than that, but none of that really matters, as it was offset. And what offsets that much in terms of sales? Well, their most profitable section, which is their used games. Those were down 13%. That is not good. And now their other stuff, their technology brands division, which has things like they had like Spring, they were doing like cell phone plans and phones and stuff. That was actually down 12% as well. We're going to come back to that because there is an interesting thing that's happened here with that could help to bail them out or maybe reinvent some of their company itself, because they actually made a sale with that, and they actually made quite a bit of money from that sale that helped to restructure. Now, down from there, we also found out more about their stock price. Now, the reason that they had this massive net loss was from a goodwill impairment charge of $557 million that, according to the COO and CEO at the time when they were presenting this, was from the sustained decline of its share price. Now, I'm sure people who are more familiar in the stocks and accounting phase could maybe even detail that a bit further down in the comments. However, the one thing that is very obvious is when you look at their stock prices, because it's currently under $13 now, and 5 years ago it was nearly $50. That was back in 2013. So massive, massive decline in their stock value and just overall value as a company then. And it doesn't look great when you start looking at charts that are just going in the complete wrong direction for a company. Now, they did also talk about how the MPD says everything's doing great, in the US for physical game sales and everything. But here's the issue about that. They noted that the MPD said that sales from this year to last year at the same time was up over 40%. The issue there is the MPD does track digital sales as well. Not for every single game. We talk about Nintendo. Blizzard doesn't give them the Battle.net for PC numbers, for example. So they don't track all digital sales, but they track enough. They tracked Red Dead's. They tracked Call of Duty's, Assassin's Creed. These are all ones that they did track, and that means that it's not all just physical games. So if they had just tracked physical and they were like, yeah, it's up, 40, 50%, I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, that's good for GameStop then, because then they have more coming in. Doesn't appear to be the case when their used game sales are dropping off quite a bit, and that's where they make all their money. They don't make money on new games. They don't make money on console sales. Sometimes even lose money on selling consoles, by the way. The Xbox One X, they might actually be making $10 to $12 on each sale because it's $500. Less with that, the markdown, the $400 with the rebate and everything, but still, that's rebate towards them. They're actually going to rebate from Microsoft for that sale of $400 as opposed to the $500 that they'll just make $12 on. Think about that. They make $12 on a $500 sale. The other issue that GameStop is running into right now is that they are selling stuff and relying on companies that don't actually like GameStop to exist. Because, of course, it's more expensive to put a physical game in a shop because they will get some kind of percentage. And they also sell those used games, which will at times take away from a sale for one of those publishers. The company like Ubisoft, if you walk in and there's a new game there or there is a used game there of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and even if the used one is like $10 to $15 cheaper, you might just buy the used one just to save some money, and I can tell you now, Ubisoft does not like that. Or, on the other side, if you go there and instead buy digital straight from them, sure, there's still a cut that goes to, Microsoft or Sony, but still, if you're buying from the digital store, they've already outlined it. They lose 30%, goes to the company that has that store open, whether it's Sony or Microsoft, but then the rest goes to them. Whereas on the other side, they get 55% back if you buy physical because of all the packaging, the goods, and everything they have to do for putting it on the shelf. So they want digital. They don't really want GameStop to exist as much, and there have been complaints in the past about used game sales because GameStop posted almost $400 million in used game sales, and that was down from last year. So think about that. Possibly up to $400 million, it could have gone elsewhere to possibly the companies that have actually created that game that you went and bought. So they're relying on other companies to make games for them to then take and sell. So they don't really do a lot themselves to sustain themselves. Now, they have tried to do a bunch of different ventures. If you walk into a GameStop now, what do you see? You probably see the store half full of collectibles, shirts, and just an assortment of merchandise that's not specifically video games. It might be video game themed, but it's not a video game they take home and you play. And that seems to be something they're just trying to figure out. I heard that they were thinking about experimenting with comic books even. GameStop is in trouble and they don't know really what to do. Now, they do have a chance here to figure it out and restructure because, believe it or not, I don't really know how this happened. They sold their spring line. So they would actually sell cell phones and plans and everything with AT&T. They managed to sell that entire line for $700 million. This was reported, I saw on November 21st. So that means that they have $700 million to kind of play around with. Now, what are they going to do with that? That's hard to say. They do talk about how they might work to pay down some of their outstanding debt. They might look to other ventures outside of GameStop. They've done all kinds of crazy stuff. They bought ThinkGeek and some other places. They could purchase another company maybe and get away from games, or they said they could maybe try to invest more and more into the gaming side. So yeah, GameStop is, they're almost like just throwing anything they can at the wall right now and just to see what sticks. And at least they have some money to play around with that. But after seeing just the value of their stocks dropping, which is something else that they kept harping on, maybe they would buy back some of their shares to try to increase value. They're just trying to figure out how to stay afloat is what it feels like right now. So if you're a fan of GameStop, 5 years from now, they might not be around. Look how much their stock has dropped in 5 years. How much further can it drop? It's already, today it's down 6%. I don't know. When do we get to a point where we go, yeah, GameStop might be in some trouble. They've been closing stores. I don't know if they're going to go away in 2 or 3 years, but by the next generation, if that digital swing continues going that way to where it's 80% digital and 20% physical, I don't know if GameStop can stick around on that. They're going to figure things out, whether they lean more into their retro games. And I will tell you, some of those systems that you buy from stores like the Retron 2 and 3 and the Retron, those stores actually make decent profit margin on those accessories and systems. So maybe GameStop does lean into that retro side. They sell NES controllers, like aftermarket ones, Super Nintendo controllers, systems like the ones that will actually play the games, like Retrons and stuff. That's kind of something they could do. I feel like they're not leaning as much into retro because they don't think there's a big enough market there, and there is a limited supply of games, of course. There's only so many Super Mario Worlds out there on the Super Nintendo that you can get and then flip. So maybe they're concerned about that, although retro stores have actually been doing all right now. So that's kind of where we are with GameStop. It's definitely a scary future for them with all these companies and publishers and developers looking more towards the digital side. If streaming takes off, it's over for GameStop. I don't know what they do. Let me know what you guys think about this down below with GameStop in what appears to be a world of trouble. How much longer do you think they're going to stick around? Do you think with that sale and $700 million, do you think they could figure out a way to turn around? And what would you do? That's the biggest question. What would you do with the $700 million to try to right the ship, if you will, and make this work? Thanks, guys, for watching. Make sure to hit the like button if you liked the video, dislike it if not, and I'll see you in the next video.